The day I found out my boyfriend had been deleting my emails was the day I understood what it meant to have your future stolen by someone who smiled at you every morning over coffee. His name was Rick, mine is Annie Blake, and for 6 years I thought we were building something. We met junior year in college, me grinding through nursing prerequisites, him coasting through business electives, both of us killing time in Intro to Psychology on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. He sat 2 rows back and to the left. I remember because he always came in late, always with coffee, always with that easy, unhurried confidence that business majors seem to wear like a second skin. I didn't have that kind of confidence. I had flashcards. We started talking in the way you do when you're 20 and someone is consistently in your peripheral vision. Study sessions that ran long, walks across campus that didn't go anywhere in particular. By senior year, we were in statistics together and officially something, though I'm not sure we ever sat down and named it. That was the thing about Rick. He was good at impressions, good at the surface of things. He smiled easily and talked easily and made you feel, at least in the early years, like you had landed somewhere safe. I was the first person in my family to leave Miami, the first to get a bachelor's degree, the first to go into medicine. My mother had pressed her palm flat against my cheek the morning I left for D.C. and didn't say anything for a long moment, which told me everything. I carried that with me through every exam, every clinical rotation, every long shift that left me so tired I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage for 10 minutes before I had the energy to drive home. I was proud of what I'd built, because what comes later, what he did, only makes sense if you understand what that pride cost me. By the time we graduated, Rick and I had settled into something comfortable. He took a job at a consulting firm in Maryland. I started working as a registered nurse at a hospital in D.C. We split an apartment in Columbia Heights, divided the bills down the middle, fell into the rhythms of people who have been together long enough to stop performing for each other. It was fine. Not extraordinary, but fine. What I had always known, though, even when everything else was comfortable and predictable, was that a bachelor's degree was never my finish line. I had always meant to become a nurse practitioner. More independence, the ability to create treatment plans, provide diagnoses, in some states, no mandatory physician supervision, and a specialty in women's health because I had read enough research to know how consistently underserved women were, how much went unstudied, how many conditions went years without a proper name simply because the people doing the research hadn't thought to look. That was my plan. That had always been my plan. 3 years into my nursing career, I started looking seriously at nurse practitioner programs. The problem was D.C. Nothing here fit what I was looking for. So I widened my search. New Jersey, New York, Boston, San Diego. I made a spreadsheet, compared programs, noted deadlines, mapped out backup options. If no program worked out, I would apply to hospitals in those cities that offered tuition assistance so I could fund the degree while working. I told Rick about it one evening in March. We were eating takeout on the couch, and I walked him through the whole thing, the programs, the cities, the timeline. He was quiet for a moment. "San Diego," he said. "That's across the country." "I know. And Boston." "I know, Rick." He set down his fork. "So you're just, planning to move? To one of these places?" "That's generally what happens when you get into a program," I said, keeping my voice even. "You go to where the program is." "What about us?" I looked at him. He was staring at the television, not at me. "We'd figure it out. Long distance for a couple of years, or you could look for work in one of those cities. Plenty of consulting firms in New York and Boston." He nodded slowly, said something like, "Yeah, okay," changed the subject. I thought it was the distance he didn't like. I thought it was about the inconvenience of reorganizing a life we'd built together. What I didn't know yet was that it had nothing to do with the distance at all. I submitted my applications in April, starting with the programs that had rolling admissions. I had a 3.8 GPA, above the stated average for every program I applied to. I had 2 strong reference letters from attending physicians I'd worked alongside. I had volunteering hours at a community health center 4 blocks from our apartment, and I had contributed to quality improvement projects at both hospitals I'd worked at since graduating. I was not being arrogant. I was being realistic. My application was solid. I expected to hear something by June, maybe July at the latest. June came and went. July arrived. Nothing. No acceptance letters, no requests for interviews. There were 2 rejection emails from 2 of the jobs I had applied to, but silence from everyone else. Just silence. A kind of silence that started to feel less like patience and more like something was wrong. I had a colleague named Denise who had applied to her programs around the same time. We weren't applying to the same schools, but we had talked through the process together, compared notes, commiserated over personal statement drafts. By mid-July, Denise had already heard from 3 programs, 2 acceptances and a rejection. "Have you heard anything?" she asked me one afternoon during a break. "Just 2 rejections, but I know my applications to the schools were really strong," I said. She frowned. "That's weird. You applied earlier than I did." "I know," I said. "I know." I started checking my spam folder. Then my trash. I Googled whether university emails could disappear, whether there was some technical glitch that could explain why multiple institutions had collectively decided not to respond to an applicant. I read forum posts from people who had experienced email delivery issues and came away with nothing useful and a headache. I was not someone who checked emails at work. That was a firm rule I had kept since my first week as a nurse. When I was on shift, fully and completely, because the alternative was someone getting hurt. But by late July, the silence had gotten under my skin in a way that made the rule feel impossible to hold. One Tuesday, in the last week of July, I was doing a medication check on a patient in room 4 when I let myself glance at my phone. There it was. A subject line from Boston, from my first choice program, "Last opportunity to respond regarding your acceptance." My hands went cold. And then the overhead speaker crackled, "Code blue, 4th floor," and a second later my charge nurse appeared in the doorway of room 4 with that particular look on her face, and I put my phone in my pocket. The next 40 minutes were the kind that remind you why this job demands everything. The code blue pulled every available body to the 4th floor. While I was there, one of my own patients, a woman 2 days post-op, spiked a fever and her blood pressure dropped fast enough that the monitor alarm triggered in the hallway. I ran back to her, got the attending on the phone, coordinated with the aide. Then the pharmacy called to say they hadn't filled a standing order for one of my other patients because of a flagging issue in the system, and I had to pull up his chart and walk through the whole medication history with the pharmacist while standing at the nurse's station. By the time the hallway quieted, by the time the post-op patient was stabilized and the pharmacy issue resolved, and the code blue on 4 had ended the way they sometimes end, my shift had 20 minutes left. I found a corner near the supply closet, took out my phone. The email wasn't there. I checked the inbox. Nothing. Spam. Nothing. Trash. Nothing. Searched Boston. Searched the program name. Searched every variation I could think of. Gone. I stood there for a moment, completely still, running through what I knew for certain. I had seen that subject line. I had read those words. Last opportunity to respond regarding your acceptance. I had not imagined it. My eyes had been on that screen, and it was gone. I finished my shift on autopilot, said the right things to the right people, documented what needed to be documented, handed off to the night nurse without incident. Then I sat in the family waiting area near the elevators, quiet at this hour, mostly empty, and went through my phone like I was solving a crime. Every folder, every filter, every archive setting, nothing. I thought about calling the program directly, looked up the number, saved it, thought about what I would even say. I received an email and then it disappeared, and imagined how that would sound. Then I thought about John. John Reeves worked in IT on the 5th floor. We had the kind of collegial friendship that comes from years of crossing paths in hospital corridors. He knew my name, I knew his. We had once spent 20 minutes at a department holiday party talking about the city's parking situation. He was good at his job. I knew that from the way people talked about him. I took the stairs. The elevator was an exercise in patience I didn't have. 2 flights, no waiting. The elevator in that hospital moved like it was considering its options. slow on a good day, prone to stopping mid-floor and humming to itself before deciding to continue. And I'd been stuck in it twice that month already, once for 7 minutes with a supply cart and a very talkative orderly. Not tonight. I didn't have 7 minutes. John's office was at the end of a corridor that always smelled faintly of old coffee. The door was open. He was at his desk, glasses on, staring at 2 monitors simultaneously. He looked up when I appeared in the doorway and must have read something in my face, the specific look of a person who has been holding it together for hours and is now very close to the edge, because he straightened up immediately. "What's wrong?" he said. I started to explain. I got through the broad outline, applied to programs, no responses all summer from the nursing programs, saw an email at work today, went to open it, it wasn't there, and then something in my chest cracked open and I cried. Not quietly. I sat in the chair across from his desk and cried in a way that surprised me, like the effort of holding it back had cost more than I realized. John didn't rush me. He handed me a box of tissues from his desk drawer and waited. "Okay," he said when I'd gotten myself together. "Let me take a look." He turned to his computer and opened a diagnostic interface I didn't recognize, then pulled up a secondary screen and typed something I couldn't read from where I was sitting. "Tell me your email address," he said. I told him. "And when did you see this message? Approximate time?" I gave him the window, somewhere between 3:15 and 3:30. He started typing. "I'm going to walk you through what I'm doing so you know what's happening," he said, which I was grateful for, because watching someone work in silence when you're in crisis is its own particular kind of torture. "First, I'm looking at the activity log for your account. Emails don't just disappear. If something was there and then wasn't, there's a record of why." I nodded. Not entirely following, but following enough. "Your provider keeps server-side logs," he said. "Even when a message gets deleted from all your visible folders, trash included, the server records the action. What I'm looking for is a deletion event that corresponds with the time you saw that message." He scrolled. Stopped. "There," he said quietly. He turned the monitor slightly so I could see. I didn't understand most of what was on the screen, timestamps, action codes, alphanumeric strings, but he pointed to a line and explained what it meant. A deletion event, 3:18 p.m. The email from Boston removed from my inbox within minutes of arriving. "This wasn't automatic," he said. "This was manual." My mouth went dry. "Now let me check something else." He typed again. "If deletion events go back further, if this is a pattern, I may be able to recover some messages. Anything deleted in the last 30 days might still be retrievable at the server level, depending on your provider's retention policy." He worked quietly for a few minutes. I watched the screen without understanding it, following his voice instead. "Annie," he said. Something in his tone made me go still. "There are a lot of deletion events." He pulled them up. A list of timestamps going back weeks, each one corresponding to a message arriving, and then, within minutes, disappearing. Subject lines that began with second notice and third attempt and following up on your application. One that said interview request. Please respond at your earliest convenience. Each one erased before I had a chance to see it. John started the recovery process. It took about 20 minutes. When the messages populated, there were 14 of them. I read every one. All 5 programs had accepted me. 2 of the backup hospital positions had requested interviews. 2 others had sent rejections, which I could live with. Those were the only 2 emails that I had gotten. My first choice in Boston had written 3 times. The last email, the one I'd seen on my phone for 30 seconds before the code blue pulled me away, was a final notice, a deadline that was only 12 hours away. I sat very still for a moment. "Let me check one more thing," John said carefully. He pulled up the sign-in history for my account. I watched him go through it, line by line. Every instance someone had logged into my email with timestamps and IP addresses. "These are your sign-ins from work?" he said. "Yes, my work IP." "And this one? And this one?" He pointed to a cluster of entries. Not my work IP, not my home IP, Maryland. The sign-ins ran every 10 to 15 minutes, consistent, methodical, across every day I had been on shift for months. Someone had been logging into my account with the regularity of a scheduled task, checking it, deleting what needed to be deleted, logging out. "Annie," John said, "who has your login credentials?" The answer arrived before he finished the sentence. Rick. I had given him my email password 2 years earlier when I was traveling to a nursing conference in Atlanta and needed him to check and forward something. I had never changed it afterward. Had never thought to. I had given him a key and forgotten I'd given it, and he had used it to quietly dismantle my future for months. In John's office, while the recovery was running, and John was quietly doing something on his second monitor, I sat with the memories that had suddenly rearranged themselves into a pattern I hadn't seen before. Senior year, stats class. Rick had asked what I scored on the midterm in that joking way he had, the one where he pretended not to care. I'd told him honestly, I always told him honestly, it never occurred to me not to, and I'd done better than him, significantly better. He had been quiet that evening, short with me. I had attributed it to stress. Finals season. Normal. The award I'd received at the nursing school gala in April of senior year, a small monetary stipend, a certificate, a name on a plaque in the hallway. Rick had smiled and said congratulations and then spent the drive home talking about something else entirely, and I had let the evening shift away from it because I was used to him not dwelling on my accomplishments. I had called it modesty, called it the way he was. What I had interpreted for 6 years as personality quirks and situational moodiness was actually a system. A consistent, persistent response to any sign that I was pulling ahead, or might pull ahead, or could someday be measured against him and found to be more. What he had done wasn't impulsive. It wasn't a bad week or a moment of petty jealousy. He had sat down and calculated it. He had logged in every 10 to 15 minutes, every day I was on shift, for months, to make sure nothing positive slipped through. I guess he had calculated that he had to let some things through, but only the rejections, because it would have been too suspicious if absolutely no one had gotten back to me. He had watched me come home frustrated and defeated and spiral into self-doubt, and he had sat across from me and eaten dinner and asked about my day. The fire in my chest started then, low and contained, but real. John set up a forwarding rule for my email account. All incoming messages to my account would be automatically redirected to a new email address I created on the spot with a password that was 17 characters and had 2-factor authentication on my personal cell. Even if Rick logged in and intercepted the originals, the copies would go somewhere he couldn't reach. "Don't change your old password yet," John said. He said it carefully, like he understood what I was thinking. "I know," I said. "Not yet." I couldn't go home that night. I wasn't afraid of Rick, not exactly, but there was something building in my chest that I didn't trust myself to carry into the same room as him. The fire was there, low and steady, and I needed it to stay controlled. I sent him a text from the hospital parking garage, had to pick up a second shift, short-staffed, sleeping here tonight. He replied with a thumbs up, no questions, which was either coincidence or the comfortable confidence of someone who didn't think they'd been found out. I sat in the car for a long time. I thought about what love is supposed to be, not the idealized version. I've never been someone who put much stock in the idealized version, but the practical version. The version that shows up in the small decisions. You know someone's dreams, you know what they work for, what they're sacrificing, what the finish line means to them, and you protect that. You don't have to share it, don't have to want the same things, but you protect it because it belongs to them, and they belong, in some measure, to you. Rick had known. He had heard me talk about the nurse practitioner programs for years. He knew about the women's health specialty and why I'd chosen it. He had sat at our kitchen table and listened to me describe the application process. He had done all of that and then logged into my email and quietly, methodically, made sure I would never find out that I'd succeeded. Not because he thought I couldn't handle the news, not because he was protecting me from something, because the idea of me moving forward was something he could not tolerate, and he would have gone on forever, smiling, attentive, supportive on the surface, while that fire burned everything I'd built down to nothing. I called my supervisor from the parking garage. explained that I had a personal emergency. Miraculously, Cynthia, a colleague who was always looking for extra hours, was available the next day, and I was given the day off. Then I called some sketchy moving company from an online search, 2 guys who had a truck, and who were available tomorrow. I want to tell you what 3 hours of focused, directed anger looks like. It looks like a woman moving through an apartment she has lived in for 4 years, with a roll of sticky notes and a very clear head. The moving company arrived at 10. Rick left for work in Maryland at 8:30. He wouldn't be back before 5, and I was not planning to be there when he was. I went through every room with the sticky notes marking what was mine. The dining room table that had belonged to my grandmother, heavy dark wood, 6 chairs, the piece of furniture I had been most careful with in every apartment since I inherited it at 22. I tagged it. The reproduction of an old painting from the UK, the order of release, that I had spent $300 on at a gallery in London when I was 24 and attending a nursing conference. Malay, 1853, a woman pressing her child to her chest while her husband is released from captivity, her face composed and exhausted and fierce all at once. I had loved that painting since I first saw it. I tagged it. The ceramics I had collected from weekend market trips over the years. The good glassware. The small lamp I'd bought on sale from a shop in Georgetown that I had never once seen Rick acknowledge the existence of. I had paid for the bed. I left the bed. By 1 in the afternoon, the truck was loaded. The apartment looked like a stage set after someone has stripped it for reuse, structurally intact, oddly hollow. The couch was there, but the table wasn't. The walls had pale rectangles where art had hung. The kitchen shelves held his things and gaps where mine had been. Storage unit first, then the Airbnb my sister had booked for me because I didn't know what accounts Rick had access to and I wasn't using my credit card for anything he might be able to trace. When I got to the Airbnb, I sat on the edge of the bed and went through every account I had ever shared with him or mentioned in his presence. Bank accounts, streaming services, credit cards, all of it. Changed passwords, set up new contact emails, canceled joint subscriptions, issued new card numbers where I could. The last thing I did, at 4 o'clock precisely, was change the password on my old email account. At 4:15, the first text came in. "Hey, you having any trouble with your emails?" I stared at that for a moment, casual, almost offhand, but the timing was exact. He had tried to log in within 15 minutes of my password change because that was his schedule. That was what he did, every 10 to 15 minutes while I was on shift. And when he couldn't get in, his first instinct was not to wonder what had happened to his girlfriend. His first instinct was to ask about the email account. That told me everything I needed to know about what his priority had been. "No," I typed back. "Why would there be a problem? Oh, I'm having trouble getting into mine. Maybe the servers are down." He was stalling, buying time. I could picture him sitting at his desk in Maryland, opening an incognito browser, trying my email address with the old password, getting rejected, trying again, trying variations. Maybe searching his memory for whether I had ever mentioned a backup address or a recovery option. Maybe checking whether I had security questions he might know the answers to. At 4:30, I watched the location icon on his phone move. He left work early. His normal departure was after 5, sometimes close to 6. He was heading home, the way you head home when you want to make sure you're there to intercept something before someone else finds it, as if physical presence in the apartment could solve a problem that lived entirely in the digital world. He arrived home at 4:58. I know because that's when the texts started in earnest. "Where is our stuff? Did someone break in?" "Annie, where are you? I'm calling the police. Someone robbed us." "Annie, answer me." "Annie!" I waited until the message count hit double digits. Then I sent one text back. I took my things, everything in that apartment that was mine. The response came in seconds. "What does that mean? What's going on? Why would you do that? Are you okay? I don't understand. Call me, please." I put my phone face down on the bed and called Geneva Robinson, a lawyer. I've heard other women tell their stories, the ones that get shared and reshared, the ones that rack up positive comments. And there's always a moment where the woman says something like, "I wasn't looking for revenge. I just wanted him to know what he'd done. I just wanted to protect myself and move on. I respect that, I really do. But that was not me. I wanted revenge." I'm saying this plainly, without softening it, without the disclaimer that usually follows. I wanted Rick to suffer in a way that was proportionate to what he had done, and what he had done was not small. This was not a man who forgot an anniversary or said something thoughtless at a dinner party. This was a man who had made a decision, calm, calculated, sustained over months, to reach into my life and quietly remove my future. One email at a time, every 10 to 15 minutes. While I was on a hospital floor keeping other people alive, he could have taken everything from me, the programs, the career I had mapped out, the specialty I had chosen because I believed women deserved better medicine than they were getting. He could have taken all of it and handed me back a smaller life and watched me settle into it. And I would never have known. I would have grieved the loss and eventually accepted it, the way you accept things you can't explain, and he would have sat across from me at my grandmother's table and eaten dinner and known exactly what he'd done. That was the part I couldn't get past. Not just the act itself. The act was unforgivable, yes, but it was the afterward I kept returning to. The months of watching me, the deliberate performance of concern when I came home defeated, the patience of it. He had been patient in a way that required genuine effort, and he had directed that effort entirely toward my destruction, and then he had kissed me goodnight. The fire in my chest that had been building since John turned that monitor toward me, that fire needed somewhere to go. I was going to give it somewhere to go. John, the IT guy, had given me Geneva's name before I left the hospital. She handled cases involving unauthorized computer access, had done it for years, had seen all the variations. I told her what I knew, the IP logs, the timestamps, the deleted messages, the recovered emails with their second and third attempt subject lines. She listened without interrupting. "What he did falls under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act," she said. "Unauthorized access to a protected computer, your email account qualifies. He also potentially faces charges under the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, specifically the Stored Communications Act, which covers accessing stored electronic communications without authorization." "He had my password," I said. "I gave it to him." Authorization given for a specific purpose doesn't extend indefinitely, and it doesn't cover this purpose, she said. "You gave him access to retrieve physical mail while you were traveling. That's a narrow, time-limited, specific authorization. What he did was systematic and ongoing, and it was done to intercept and destroy communications you had a right to receive. That's a different thing entirely." She also mentioned identity theft considerations. He had accessed accounts in my name, taken actions in my name over an extended period. "There's also the matter of malicious communications," she said. "The argument that this constitutes intentional interference with your right to receive correspondence, particularly in the context of an ongoing relationship where he had knowledge of the impact." I asked her what she recommended. "Document everything you have," she said. "The logs John recovered, screenshots of the sign-in history, the recovered emails and their timestamps. Don't delete anything. And don't warn him." I asked why not. "Because if he knows what you have, he'll try to get ahead of it. People in these situations contact email providers, claim account compromise, try to create an alternative narrative. Right now, he doesn't know the extent of what's recoverable. That's an advantage." I thanked her and said I would be in touch. Then I sat in the Airbnb bedroom with the lamp on and the city going quiet outside the window and thought about the conversation I was going to have. I gave myself Sunday, not out of sentiment, out of practicality. 52 texts and 14 missed calls in a 48-hour window told me that Rick was not in a state where a conversation would be productive. I needed him to run out of momentum. I needed him to stop throwing things at the wall so that when I spoke, there was silence to fill. On Sunday evening, I called. He picked up before the second ring. "Annie, thank God. Are you okay? What's happening? Where have you been?" "I'm fine," I said. "I need to talk to you about something. Please just tell me what's going on. I came home and everything was gone. I didn't know if you'd been hurt or—" "Rick, My voice was even. I had practiced being even. I need you to listen to me. Can you do that? A pause. Yes. I found out what you've been doing with my email. Silence. I know you've been logging in, I said. I know the IP address of where the sign-ins originated. I know the timestamps, every 10 to 15 minutes, every day I was on shift. I know that you've been deleting emails from the programs I applied to. I know that I was accepted to every program and that I had interview requests from 2 positions, and that none of that reached me because you made sure it didn't. Nothing from his end of the line. The Boston program, my first choice. I had a final notice in my inbox at 3:18 on Tuesday. You deleted it at 3:19. I saw the subject line for 30 seconds before a code blue pulled me away from my phone. When I came back, it was gone. I thought I was losing my mind. Annie, I'm not done. I paused. Do you want to tell me what the explanation is? Because I'm listening, and I genuinely want to understand what explanation exists for this. A long silence. Then, it's not as simple as you're making it sound. Then explain it to me in its complexity. I was scared. His voice shifted. Softer, something that might have been genuine and might have been performance. With Rick, I had learned, those were not always easy to distinguish. The thought of you leaving, moving across the country, us doing long distance, I panicked. I didn't want to lose you. So you deleted my emails. I know it was wrong. You deleted my emails, I said again, not with heat, just the fact, placed in the air between us. You had access to my account because I trusted you, and you used it to monitor my inbox every 15 minutes and erase correspondence that was addressed to me. For months. While I sat at home convinced that I wasn't good enough to get in anywhere, while I questioned whether I had done something wrong on my applications, while I watched a colleague hear back from programs and couldn't understand why I hadn't, you watched me go through all of that. Annie, I love you. That is not what love looks like. We can fix this. I'll call the schools. I'll explain what happened. I've already called the schools, I said. I've already handled it. Silence again. Then quieter. You've handled it. John from IT helped me recover the deleted messages. He also pulled the access logs, IP addresses, timestamps, all of it. I heard something shift on his end, a different quality of silence, the silence of someone doing math. I'm not calling to warn you, I said. I'm calling because you were a significant part of my life for 6 years, and I thought you deserved to hear this from me directly. What happens next isn't something I can control or stop, but you should know that I know, and you should know that I have the documentation. I ended the call before he could respond. 2 weeks later, Geneva Robinson filed the complaint. The investigation moved fast, the IP logs were clean, the timestamps were consistent, the volume and pattern of access made the intent clear. There was no version of the evidence that supported an innocent explanation. Rick was arrested on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after I changed my email password. His mother called me the Thursday after. Annie, she said. She had always called me sweetheart before. Today it was Annie. I think there's been a misunderstanding. There hasn't been, I said. He made a mistake. He's a young man. He was scared of losing you. He wasn't thinking... Mrs. Hartley, I said, your son logged into my email account every 15 minutes for months. That is not a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to lock the door. What your son did was a deliberate, sustained campaign to intercept my correspondence and prevent me from advancing my career, because he didn't want me to have more than him. That required planning. It required discipline. It required him to sit across from me at dinner every night while I told him I was worried that no schools were interested in me and say nothing. A long pause. He's my son, she said finally. There was nothing left in her voice but that. I know, I said. I'm sorry for what you're going through. And I was. I was genuinely sorry for her. But I'm not going to drop the charges. The sentencing was unremarkable in the end. Probation. A fine. His record, which had been clean, now wasn't. His firm let him go. They had their own concerns about the liability of employing someone convicted of federal computer fraud, and those concerns won out. Geneva told me this was a typical outcome for a first-time white-collar offense. The jails were full. The charge would follow him, though. Background checks would find it. Conversations about it would be had in rooms he wasn't in. Let's be honest, I had wanted more punishment than that. The fire in my chest didn't go out entirely when the gavel came down. What he took from me, the months, the doubt, the near miss with Boston's deadline, that doesn't disappear because someone is placed on probation. But I made a decision around that time. I could stay inside the fire, or I could let it burn off and move forward. I'm in San Francisco now. The program I'm in is 3 years, with a clinical specialty in women's health. My cohort is 14 people, and I am, by most measures, the most prepared nurse in the room, which is not something I say with arrogance, only with the exhausted relief of someone who spent years working to be exactly this ready. My grandmother's table is in my apartment here. The Order of Release painting hangs in my bedroom, where I see it every morning. The woman in the painting, the one who has come to get her husband out of prison, who has traveled however far she had to travel to stand in that doorway. I've looked at her face for years and only recently started to understand what I was seeing. She's not triumphant, she's not angry, she's just done what she came to do. I thought about the signs I missed, the chill after the stats exam, the muted response to the award, the resistance to anything that positioned me ahead of him. I saw them. I filed them away under he's having a bad week and everyone gets jealous sometimes and I'm probably reading into it. Who would think to look for it? Who would think the person eating dinner across from you had decided at some quiet internal moment that your future was a threat to be neutralized? I'm more careful now. Not frightened. Careful. I know the difference between someone who finds your success inconvenient and someone who finds it intolerable. I know what the second kind looks like when they're trying to look like the first. I don't regret pressing charges. Some people would have walked away, collected themselves, and called it a private matter. I understand that choice. It wasn't mine. What he did wasn't a private matter. It was a federal crime, and crimes have consequences, and that is not something I was willing to absorb quietly on behalf of someone who had shown me exactly who he was. The morning after I found out the penalty Rick received, I woke up and made my version of comfort food, which is scones with raisins and Thai tea, and sat by the window of my new place. I watched the city come alive, and I felt something that took me a few minutes to identify. Calm, not healed, not resolved, just still. The fire in my chest had found somewhere to go, and I was, for the first time in months, exactly where I meant to be. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe.